Okay, welcome everybody to another episode of State of the Onion. Hello, welcome, people waving, lovely. Wave if you're on camera, except Fabio, he's thinking. Wouldn't want to disturb that.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you, welcome, Brian. Okay, so yeah, this is State of the Onion. What is true about truth? Is there anything true about truth? We don't know. And that's the question we are indeed here to discuss. If anybody's out there, the link is in the chat. There's limited spaces, but don't worry, we will make room for all views. So, yeah, welcome to everybody. I'm going to pass that over to Xbox because he's here for this week and he is obviously the co-host. So, welcome to Fabio, Dave, Lucky number 7, Headless Chicken, Speed of Sound, Mike, welcome, Minnow, welcome Minnow, and of course Brian, our very favourite, who I'm going to put in the centre there. So, welcome to everyone. I'm going to hand over to Xbox now to introduce the topic and start us off. So, over to you, Xbox.
Yeah, appreciate it, and thanks for y'all showing up. Truth is a hard one, right? It's people have different views. If it even exists, is it something you can actually obtain? There's a lot of philosophical views on it. Most of today's views of people look at it a correspondence theory, like what corresponds to reality is true. I stick more idealism. It's with a coherence theory, so anything that coheres with other beliefs are true. That comes kind of out of idealism. There's also pragmatic views of truth, and kind of how Seamus or Simon, sorry about that,
It's okay.
opened up. It's true. True. There's a deflationary theory which just says it's a linguistic thing. It's not actually a thing to obtain. It's just used in linguistics. So, and then, I mean, is there objective or subjective? And these apply to theist and non-theist. This is going to be a part of your grounding of your worldview. So it's hard to grasp. You can, a lot of times you end up in an infinite regress or a circular kind of view, but those are the meta-analysis of it. So, but that's about where we are. If anybody has any views on that.
Well, can I ask a question?
Please do.
Absolutely.
Okay, when we're talking about truth and like the correspondence theory, I guess you're talking about propositions that align with reality, and the truth would be in the propositions. Is that what you mean?
I think that would be closer to the deflationary, where it gets into like a linguistic type of thing. Correspondence would be trying to think how to explain it. That it'd be that which corresponds to reality. So it's.
So it's
I guess it really depends on how you define reality, right? Like.
Oh well, I think we could all agree on what reality is, what it is, and it doesn't matter what the truth of it is. It's still reality. But if I make a proposition that Simos is drinking a cup of tea, okay, within that proposition is something that comports or conforms with reality. So is that where the truth actually is, in the propositions, or do you think it's in some other place?
No, I think I do think it's part of a linguistic thing, but I think it still sticks with the correspondence theory, that, or at least that's how you're going to think about it or state it.
Okay.
And with the correspondence theory, though, too, what we see as true in reality can also change too, with say new scientific information that changes what we thought we knew about reality. So there's so many contexts of truth, you know, whether you philosophical or mathematical, or how people use it in everyday use, and how theology uses it. So yeah, there's so many uses for the word. It's hard to just narrow it down to a discussion on truth. You have to set it up also as what parameters that involves to a specific use of the word.
But would you not say that truth itself is completely independent of human beings' knowledge or beliefs or anything like that? I mean, it doesn't matter what I believe or you believe or anyone believes. The sun's still up in the sky and it still heats the earth.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it. You know, like I would say, yes, it's true. The sun is in the sky. I could also say it's true that I used to own a Dodge truck, but I don't own it anymore. Somebody else does. So do I still own the truck? No, that's not true anymore. Even though a couple of years ago it was true that I owned that truck. So that, you know, there's so many ways of using it that first I think you have to define, I think what you're trying to do is how you're actually using the word.
Okay, sure. That truth about your truck is dependent on you and your actions. But again, you and your actions are just part of reality. And again, it's a matter of Xbox thinks you've got Ford, Simos thinks you've got Dodge. I think you've got something completely different. The truth of the matter is the truth of the matter, and it's dependent on what reality is rather than anything else.
Yeah, that, and you're, like you said, you're gonna have to get down to your worldview and build up from it like that.
Yeah, and like I said, reality as we know it though can change. Let's say the whole world thought the Earth was flat, and then we find out it's round. That the whole reality in a way changed, even though it didn't really do it. Our perception of the reality changed. So was it true when they said that? In a way, yes. But they were also wrong.
That's what I was getting at. I mean, it doesn't matter what people think. Truth is independent of what people think. Even if everybody thinks the Earth's flat, it's independently round. You know, it's independent of what people think. If there was no people here, the Earth's round, and that's the truth.
Would you? Yeah. But like if you ask an idealist, that they're going to say no, like because there's no mind to make it that way.
So tree falls in a forest.
But yeah,
Bigfoot did it.
But if you get to,
are we silent because nobody's
knowledge,
talking, or have I got sound issues?
No, you have sound issues, Brian.
You'll have to type it to him because he said he can't hear us.
Yeah. Welcome, Alex. Thank you so much for stopping by.
All right, how's it going?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Look at
just jump in whenever you like.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
If you look at knowledge being justified true belief in a lot of contexts, the truth in that equation that's independent of what you know and what you believe. That truth is going to be the truth, and it's independent of what you, out of idealism. It's going to be independent of what you think about it.
Okay, as long as we're happy with that, I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah. And sorry about that, Alex. I didn't, and as he was introducing you.
That's all right. Okay, so what was? Do you have any other questions, Lucky?
You know, I had a question I'd be wanting to ask Alex Boynton for years, but I'll save it for later on if that's okay.
Well, let's hope he turns up then, shall we?
No, Alex Boynton. Oh, God almighty. There's a blast from the past now, isn't it? How did you get him into my head?
I love it. Xbox calls me Shamos. and you or Alex spotted. Oh, what a lovely show we're going to have.
It's probably
hopefully Brian will be back so shortly as well, so that would be good. I think his name's Brian. I can't be sure anymore. Yeah. Anyway, there.
Might not be true, right?
Might not be true.
I'm so embarrassed now.
That's okay.
I'm muting my mic.
Who could know?
Mike,
can know.
Do you want to talk about what you had to say, because that sounded quite interesting? Is that
Which one?
some naturalistic foundation? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to unwind truth by thinking, okay, you have an organism, and the organism takes some action, right? So truth is always about an action that you're going to take, or you might take, or you're planning to take, or whatever. And I like to keep the mind bullshit out of it, right? And just think, okay, you have an organism. The organism is going to move toward what it needs out in the environment, right? And if it is moving in the right direction, then there's truth. And now if you take that and you can add to it, and you can go all the way up to the human organism, where we have these words for something like, okay, I'm going to say it's true that what I want to grab is there, that sort of thing. So if you separate it, and when you think about it, now think about all the ways that truth comes into play with you, and you will always find that it's some action that you plan to take, think you should take, or would take, or whatever. Well, if you believe in God, you're going to get on your knees and pray. If you don't believe in God, if God is false, you're not going to do that, whatever. But that helps unwind it and get it away from this idea that, well, is there still truth if there's no humans around? Well, the thing that is true is about something out in the world, but you can't give it some property of having truth, right? Unless you consider the organism between the relationship between the organism and whatever it is out there, and the organism's proposed action. So that's where you end up with propositions. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's actually kind of an Aristotelian base of viewing it, of having potential.
Yeah, well, yeah, I tend to like that guy sometimes. So
yeah. Just depending.
But I do this with everything. I come up with this pure naturalistic biological view of all of these philosophical problems, and it's extremely reductive to the point of being naive. But then from the reduction, you start to put meat on the bones, and you start to put branches on the tree, and you construct up to handling a human problem. So that's kind of always been my approach to, or it has been my approach to philosophy in the last 10 years anyway. I think it clears up a hell of a lot, because you don't have to wonder, oh, does this thing exist without, the human mind? And I like to really keep mind out of it.
So, well, yeah, but the problem with that, of course, is that, some things.
You got a problem?
Yeah, of course I've got a problem. Of course I've always got a problem. You know that. I have a mind. That's my problem.
Of course, that is the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So, some truths aren't mind dependent, of course, like what kind of ice cream that I prefer. Okay, so there are some things, and that seems to me something purely to do with my mind, not necessarily to do with the ice cream, although ice cream is an existent thing. It's true that vanilla ice cream exists, for instance. But it's another truth to say which my mind prefers. And now, are there things which are, when we say something is true, are we just referring to the state of things outside of my mind? Or are we referring to things that are mind dependent as well? In which case, truth seems to have more than one definition, which we should be thinking about, depending on it's contextual, in other words, right? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer to these. I'm just making shit up now.
That's where when we bring mind into it, we kind of get all balled up because we can sense the state of our own mind. Like you can sense that you like ice cream, But I mean, you would have real difficulty if you tried to figure out exactly how that worked inside your mind. But there is something about you as an organism that likes ice cream. And if there's ice cream out there, you may want to go get it. And if it's really out there, it'll be true that it's out there. That's right. But there's still something physical about you and your mind that makes you like ice cream. And we can self-reflect. Go ahead.
Let me break that a little bit. Go to a dream.
Okay.
You're in a dream state, and you have this want to jump off the cliff. I don't know, any scenario.
Yeah.
It's still going to appear the same way to you. And I mean, you might have different, laws of physics or whatever in your dream, but they're going to appear to you the same way they appear to you when you're awake.
So a dream theory of truth. I'm not sure if I've thought about that one.
I haven't really either.
That's one I haven't thought of. Like, it's not a good idea to jump off a cliff while you're sleeping, but
right.
You might be sleepwalking.
Yeah, you might be sleepwalking. You might actually jump off a cliff.
No, I have done a ton of analogies through dreams because of the philosophy view that I take, and I think you can make irrational choices, just like you can like you can jump off the cliff to die, which right, and you're making the decisions the same way you would make the decisions, or at least thinking in the same order that you would awake. So
when you're dreaming, you're kind of simulating, so you're
while you're in the dream, at least.
And it may be an entirely different world. Right.
Yeah,
I have to give that a little bit of thought. But there is this thing about being able to
underwater, where I could breathe underwater,
dreams?
Things like that. Yeah.
Oh.
And
I don't do that.
And
I always end up in a crack house with a bunch of people that are trying to kill me in my dreams. I don't know why.
I always find there's like a safety net in dreams, though, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? Like it saves you from the absolute terror when you go down those, and it never lets you get to the absolute peak of high when you go that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
no, it's a great point. Good.
But I mean,
that's what happens. It's when you wake up. That's when you realize the dream was having problems with it and things. But when you were in the dream, you were acting as if it was true that this, it was true I could breathe underwater.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Or the jumping off a cliff is a good one, because sometimes that's what you need to do to get away from, if you're being chased or something, you need to jump off a cliff and you find you can fly. So it's no problem, or sometimes you just wake up just before you hit the ground.
I've bounced on the ground before. Yeah.
You're a special one, Xbox. You are a special one. There's no doubt. What's your position anyway, Xbox? I'm wanting to ask you that.
The coherence theory. I take like coherence of the truth is what's going to cohere with my other beliefs, and if it doesn't cohere with those beliefs, then it's not going to fall into that category of truth.
Yeah.
I don't think that you can actually obtain the truth. It may be actually out there on these things, but I don't think you can ever actually reach it.
Yeah, there's an idea that we're always chasing the truth, and you can never actually catch it, like trying to get to the edge of the universe. It's always just out of reach.
Well, I don't know. Right. There are some small local places where you can get to the truth. Like right now, I have a proposition that there's a coffee cup to my left, and there's coffee in it, and I can pick it up. And when I pick it up and I drink it, it was true, and that is the end of the story. I mean, that's not a deep philosophical problem. That you can do things. You can
not until you get your red Qualia cup out, then it becomes a deep philosophical problem.
I do have my red Qualia cup. I do have my red Qualia cup in my hand right now. I'm sorry.
All hail the red Qualia cup.
Okay, so
is Scott here?
So let's just examine that a little bit, Xbox, because that's the thing. So like some people say that the definition for truth is just that which comports to reality. That's not your position, then, is it? Or is that right?
No.
Okay.
I find myself kind of between them sometimes, but no, that's not my.
Oh, look at that! He's got an Xbox mug.
All right.
I always put the word best in there so that it's always can be adjusted, so it's our best understanding or our best comparison to reality.
Right.
So that's not a red qualia cup.
That's because the information comes through the senses, right? Is that what you mean by that, Dave? And that
Yeah.
our senses can be deceptive sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, you can make mistakes, but
you need that. What's it called? A qualifier in there, just to leave room for the possibility of change. Because, like I said, we learned something new in science about reality. It doesn't change all of reality. It's just something we learned about reality, even though it may not have been known as true. It was true, and we discovered it was true, but it doesn't change reality. Learning more things about it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so that kind of is used, I think, by apologists, isn't it? Because they like to say that unless you can ground truth in some absolute ultimate, and I'm picking these words out from a particular person that we all know.
Precepts.
That
how do
if
they
you
do
can't
that?
ground it, then you can't use logic.
Yeah, that's the
what
other
are they-
definition is how theology uses truth, because according to a theologian, everything in their holy texts is true, and that would include magic zoo boats and moons splitting in two and everything else. Even
they
though those are
believe in
not part of
truth.
reality. Yeah.
They believe in truth like it's an actual thing that basically God gives them the logos by the word. So they kind of believe that words are more real than anything else in a way, like truth.
Well, it manifested as a being in Jesus, right? Jesus is the truth.
The truth, right?
The truth, the light, and the way.
It's the logos,
Yeah.
in fact. But isn't that just isn't that just a Platonist idea, isn't it? Really?
So they hung the truth on a cross.
I mean, so do we believe that?
Yeah, they did.
Do we believe that geometric forms exist in some abstract sense, or not?
I do. Yeah, I do.
There you go. Okay,
I believe
so if you think that that's the case, then why doesn't grounding exist, Mike?
Well, no, they don't exist in an abstract sense. Geometric forms actually exist in space-time. They're real things that we interact with, and we come up with abstract ideas in our brain. But an abstract idea in your brain is just your brain shooting neurons around, right? Or shooting at neurons. So, yeah, I believe that all those things like mathematics and everything, I'm a realist when it comes to that. And when a precept argues with an atheist that is not a realist, that admits to the abstract, they have that gotcha, it's supernatural, right? Because it doesn't really exist. It's in some other realm. But for me, all of that stuff is very real. I only recognize one thing: space, time, and particles, fields, quantum fields. So.
Well, on that, can I just poke at that view a little bit, because I hear that a lot.
Oh no.
I mean, in a friendly way, but I guess I'm confused a bit about how that's supposed to work, because I mean, don't you take things like geometry, right, to be talking about triangles and squares and stuff? And if I prove some theorem about triangles, I'm actually talking about triangle. They are the things that the theorem is about. Like Pythagoras' theorem is genuinely about triangles. Nonetheless, no triangle like that actually exists in space and time, right? Because show me any physical object, and it won't be perfect. Well, it won't actually embody a triangle perfectly. So if you think that you can do the work of perfect abstract objects somehow by substituting in imperfect spatiotemporal things, like how do you make sure that you're always going to be able to bridge the gap between what's left over when you compare a perfect triangle to a real one. Like, for instance, if you actually counted the angles, or however you empirically determine whether the internal angles of a shape add up to 180 degrees, right? If you were to do that with a real physical object, you might find, though it looks triangular from the outside, when you inspect it properly, it's not really. But an abstract triangle won't be like that. It'll be perfect. So it might be that it just happens that none of the quote unquote triangles that exist in space and time actually embody Pythagoras' theorem. In which case, do you think that the theorem's false? Just because contingently right now, none of the triangles are good enough to embody it to make it true. Do you know what I mean? Like, isn't there going to be a problem about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. But if you took like 3 electrons, right, and you arranged them, like no matter how you put them in space, you're going to end up with a triangle between the position of those 3 electrons. They're gonna have basically a center. So I mean, there are real triangles out there, and we have our minds. We've been able to take and look at if I drew a triangle on a paper, right, and it wasn't perfect, I could look at that and we have figured out basically this mathematical relationship. We've discovered it, but it still exists, and you could do that with 3 electrons anywhere. You could pick any 3 electrons and there would be a triangle between them, right? And the same with a square. Go ahead.
Well, if you're thinking about it like that, then you don't really need the electrons, right? Because imagine 3 points that electrons could occupy and draw a triangle around them, right? So the electrons don't do anything.
Yeah, all you need is coordinates in space and time, and because...
Well, why do you even need that? Why not just say, imagine 3 points without a coordinate system that makes it sort
without
of
a coordinate
4-dimensional
system,
anything? I just like a Cartesian grid, maybe let's just make it a 2-dimensional.
Yeah.
It's not a realistic, it's not a model of the world we live in, because it's flat and it's Cartesian.
Well, there is
completely abstract.
There is something about reality, though, that there is a certain distance between 2 electrons and 2 other electrons, right? Or 1, 2, and 3. There are these distances, and that seems about as real can get. That there are distances in space-time. I don't see any reason to abandon a Cartesian coordinate system, and it's just how we apply real numbers and integers and everything to those things is one thing, but we get a lot of truth out of that, basically. But there is something real about an electron being a mile from another electron and an electron being nanometer from it, right?
Yeah,
and there's something about it all. So
I think that what's going on in those, when you're saying about the electrons, they obviously do stand, you can make triangles with electrons. In fact, give me 3 electrons, I'll show you a triangle, right? Definitely, no matter what's going on. But the point is that like all of that, it's like when people see shapes in constellations in the sky, right? And you think, oh, this looks like a bear or something. But obviously it doesn't actually look like a bear, but in actual fact, those things are separated from each other by maybe 100 light years or something. Those things are not next to each other at all. It's a complete illusion caused by perspective that it's got anything like that. And I think that what's going on with when you're saying I can show you a triangle if you give me 3 particles, is that all you're doing is like all the work that's going on to get a triangle out of that is done completely in your mind, and it's not about what you're looking at all. You're just saying these 3 electrons remind me of this abstract object. Let me show you that. And are just referring entirely to that thing. And you may as well have cut out the reference to the physical and just said, look at this abstract object. Because see, I take the opposing view, right, I guess, which is like more of a kind of Platonist about it. So for me, I don't like these reductions to physical things. I think that you really do need to be referring to some, actually abstract, non-spatiotemporal thing when you're talking about stuff.
So
like
those are a lot of dirty words to me. Basically, I think when you look at 3 objects, that there's 3 stars out there, there is something still that we must recover and we must save from this greedy idea of we're just seeing a pattern, right? There's something about it, even if it's a fuzzy pattern. Okay, there are things that are that are very, very discrete and things that can be very fuzzy, but there's still some homogeneity about the structure of the fuzzy thing, right? So I don't want to throw the baby out when I toss the bathwater out. So I think when you look at a constellation, there is something definite about that constellation. I mean, we don't control where the stars are with our mind. That is something that's coming into us, and we're seeing a relationship. We're seeing a distance, right, based on our perspective. And the thing, when you think about perspectival slices, depending on where you are and what you are in the universe, your reality is going to be a certain way, right? But I'm saying that is just as real, even though you only have a slice. Does that make sense?
To some extent, I guess.
Okay. Well, Alex, I don't know if I made. What's your name? Or
It's
do
Alex.
you have a channel or? Okay, just Alex. Okay.
Yeah, I used to have a podcast, but I haven't done that for a while.
Okay.
Actually,
What
no,
was the
that's
name
not
of
true.
it?
I do a podcast every couple of weeks. I'm chatting shit. It's called The Sci-Fi Show. It's on this guy Skydive Phil. He has a YouTube channel where he interviews physicists and stuff. It's actually really great. You'd probably really like it, actually. He interviewed like Stephen Hawking, Roger Penrose, loads of like the world's best physicists about like the beginning of the universe, Big Bang, stuff like that. So a load of
Anybody got a
Kalam
link?
cosmological argument.
Yep, I will put a link in description for you.
Okay, I could use a link.
For sure.
The cosmological argument, that one. So I'm always arguing with AI, with ChatGPT, about this reality that I'm trying to reach, or I'm basically trying to save or bring back realism in some way, and I think that's my poison, that's my disease. So anyway, just to warn you.
Realism about what? That's just, it's a word that means about a million different things.
Yeah, that there is real is what's actually out there, that there is this space-time particle reality, and that's all there is. And from that, inside of that, all these other things happen, like these little gooey organisms that we are, that make squeaky noises at each other, like truth and shit like that. But I always go back to that reductive biological approach, and then I'm not sure if you were here when I always use reduction first and then construction to go back to where we are and to try to understand what a human being is. And I see myself always in relation to the world around me, to the local universe around me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that type of stuff in the philosophy of physics, that you would find people with a similar project as that. It's not an unusual thing.
I think
to have that as a motivation.
What is his name? Alex. God, he's a scientist. Rosenberg. Is it Alex Rosenberg?
Yeah,
I think
he's
so.
Okay. Yeah, he has a similar broadly naturalistic picture like that as well. Yeah.
Right. He's the one I resonate with the most, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a view on with that view? Do you have a view on what the universe is expanding it into?
No, that is a really interesting one, because there is no into, right? Like it's like asking what came before the Big Bang, or what's outside of space and time. Those concepts have, we cannot wrap our minds around it. We're probably never going to be able to, because we aren't that kind of a creature, right? If we solve physics problems, it's going to be with pure mathematics. So it can't be expanding. Like, if you think about a multiverse, like if there were other universes right alongside of us, they would not be alongside of us. There's no such concept as alongside of us, right? So if you think about it, there'd be a universe here and there's one further out. No, that's not the way it is. There is no space time when you're talking about outside of us. So
I think that people are not so there's a kind of horizon beyond which we don't have any information, right? And I think that no one really knows if there's anything actually spatially beyond that horizon. It's just like a limit of how far back in time and how far away in space we can receive a signal from, right? We just don't know if there's anything beyond that. So in a very straightforward sense, what we think of as the kind of bit of the universe we can see could very well be in like expanding into something else that we can't currently see.
Yeah.
And it could be whoever knows, right? It could be a massive void, could be anything. On the other hand, the expansion of space isn't like, it's like sort of new space appearing in between bits of old space or something. It's not like it's sort of all pushing out at the same time in every direction.
Yeah.
So like in a way, we're just sort of growing. The whole thing is just growing, like the way a balloon does when it expands. It's still the same balloon, it's just bigger. That's what's happening. We're just sort of growing. The universe is getting bigger. So in a way, the question doesn't really mean anything, because like the bigger we get, it's not like we become something else. We're still just the same thing. It's just more space within the same thing, like when the balloon expands. Or it's just a question of like what beyond what we can see, and we just don't know the answer to that. I think that's as far as I can see.
Who's the guy that came up with Mysterianism or whatever about the mind or about consciousness? I forgot his name, but I'm kind of a mysterious. I kind of adopt that position that we're never going to. That it's not a kind of thing that we can understand with the minds that we have. So we're never going to be able to understand deep physics, right? Except maybe mathematically. So. Mysterian. Who the hell am I thinking of? He's a famous consciousness philosopher. Mysterian. Oh, mind. Let me see here. Oh,
I feel like we've maybe wandered off the topic, though, somewhat.
Oh yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
We can do that.
so-
we can wander all over the place. That's no problem.
Yeah.
Brian,
call him again. Yeah, go ahead.
Colin McGinn.
Colin McGinn. Okay.
Yeah.
New York philosopher from Britain.
Back to the topic. Back to truth.
So can we get
What
Alex
is
to confirm
truth?
what it is? Because he hasn't actually given us an idea of what he thinks truth is.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
so you're asking me what my view is then?
Yes, please.
So I don't have a very well worked out view about this. I'm not like it's not something I've spent a huge amount of time sort of going through, but I think what we heard earlier was, sorry, was it Mike? You were saying the reductive kind of account, something to do with like biological function and pragmatism and stuff.
Yep.
And then Xbox, you were talking about it being, sorry, I forgot now. I was, as you were talking, I was like thinking, oh yeah, that's one of the really characteristic like other schools of thought on this. But remind me what it was you were saying at the time, what your view was.
Coherence theory.
Oh yeah, the coherence theory. That's right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Right. So I disagree with both of those. So that maybe that's helpful as a way of contrast. I think I already said a little bit about how I don't understand on the reductive account how, like my problem is I don't understand how you're guaranteed to get things that will definitely play the role of what you need them to do. Like the theorems require perfect triangles and stuff. So how are you going to make sure that you've got the materials at hand in nature? And then my problem with the coherence theory is something about like, it's hard to explain this straightforwardly, but it's something about like, I just think that truth is presupposed in the definition of coherence, right? Like, what do you mean by coherence? You mean something along the lines of a list of propositions that cohere with each other in some respect, right? But what do you mean propositions, right? What's a proposition? It's something that's true. So what are we talking about? Like, it just feels like you have to get truth in the picture to tell me what coherence is. I can't imagine that coherence is a more fundamental notion than truth, right? But maybe that's just my bias, because I think my position is that truth is just one of those things, like potentially like beauty and what's the other classic one in the Platonic triad? Truth, beauty, and
morality.
Yeah, the good. That's it, exactly. One of those things where it's like, I just think that they're probably the bottom level of whatever it is, reality, whatever it is we're talking about. and that they probably aren't the sort of things that get constructed out of more fundamental stuff. And I mean, you might say to me, why do you think, truth is one of those things, or the good or something? And I might just say, well, fuck it, you've got to start somewhere, right? I mean, unless you think every concept like decomposes into yet further ones, and maybe, but unless you think that at some point it stops, right? And then it's just a question of like, what is the conceptual basis that you're gonna have? And we can just put different hats on and see how they fit, of course. But like this one, to me, I think the truth is probably just one of those things that's bedrock, can't be explained in any other terms. You need it in order to say stuff about, it seems to me you need it in order to say stuff about how adaptive a behavior is for an organism or something. That seems to me the sort of thing that presupposes that it's true that this thing is adaptive towards behavior or whatever it is. So that again sort of feels like truth is, it just naturally finds itself underneath the concepts that we use most of the time. That's how I would describe it. It just sort of on inspection, if you dig around, you find that, oh yeah, truth was already presupposed in that pile of things I was talking about, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I guess that's what I think. It just isn't sort of explicable in any further terms. It's some kind of primitive to just say, P is true or whatever.
No, you're right on the button. Yeah. I take the view of like properly basic beliefs and that they're just stated, so it aligns with exactly what I believe.
Well, yeah, but let's be careful to draw a distinction between an epistemic issue and what are we talking about, metaphysical or something, right? Like ontological or whatever. Where like I'm not really talking about like this state of mind that I'm in, or my beliefs or my attitudes in any respect. I'm just simply sort of abstracting out of that and just thinking about the notion of truth as purely as I can. And in that picture, it doesn't involve me, my mind, anybody's mind, whatever, right? It's just something like propositions that are true and some propositions that are false. And if you want to talk about like my beliefs and knowledge and that type of thing and those structures, that's a different conversation, I think. So, for instance, I think that the coherence theory of truth is a non-starter and doesn't really get going. The coherence theory in terms of beliefs or knowledge, much, much more plausible, right? So I would treat those as completely different, and I wouldn't want to confuse the two things, right? So at the moment, we're just talking about ontology, not epistemology.
I was just meaning, I didn't mean to bring up the epistemic. I was just meaning about stating the thing instead of finding it, I guess.
Right.
So what you're saying, Alex, is that we can't have truth without presupposing truth to begin with. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, it's kind of something that you can't do without. Yeah, you can't build it out of more fundamental things. It's a sort of atom, a sort of conceptual atom or something. But one way to think about it is it's a kind of like a semantic primitive. So if you think about it in terms of like all the words in your language and what they mean, you could like define this word means this word and that word or something. And after a while, you'd want to get down to a point where the words were basic, just introduced as axioms. And I think this would be like that. It's a semantic primitive. It just cannot be, the meaning of it can't be given in any other sort of combination of other terms put together, right? Like some people will say the good is whatever I like or something. So what you're doing then is you're offering that as a sort of a translation, a rewording of what it means for something to be good. It just means it's what I like. And what I'm saying about the good is that there's no translation like that, which would adequately paraphrase it away. It's sort of sui generis thing on its own. Sorry if I'm belaboring that point too much. I obviously have a habit of doing it.
No.
It's something I'd never thought of before, to be quite honest with you. A truth without presupposing truth. But I guess you're quite right.
Yeah, and the more angles you can give other view, it's perfect.
Yeah, one of the things I just wanted to bring up about the angles, just to go back very quickly, and I don't want to go back and rehash the whole conversation again, but it was something that I heard in a debate from a philosopher let me just think of his name, Arif Ahmed, said that it was consistent with his empirical worldview that when he looks at a table, it's divided. It can be made to be. It is 360 degrees. So rather than looking at the angles themselves, he was saying, look, that's consistent with empiricism because it's an observation which I make about the table. And he obviously is helping himself to some sort of fictionalist version, I guess, of mathematics in order to account for that. And that's part of naturalism for him. Does that make sense, that, what I just said? Or have I misunderstood him?
Yeah, I don't know his specific views on what he thinks a philosophy of maths is about, like if he's a realist about that or not. So actually really interesting. But I could imagine him being, because he's a naturalist, right? He's an atheist and a naturalist. But I could also imagine him defending some sort of at least modest realism about mathematical objects along the lines of how a lot of philosophers do, which is that they'll say stuff like, they'll say, the philosophers of maths who want to talk realistically about maths will say, look at what mathematicians do, right? Look at mathematicians when they talk to each other about what they're doing. They say things like, there is a number such that if you apply this function, the whatever theorem can be proven, whatever. And then they're saying there is a number. They're referring to a number. That's a thing, it's a token item of their, you know, the things that they trade in, right? Like just when a computer programmer will say there's a bug in my system, whatever, a bug is a token example of an entity that a computer programmer engages with, right? And straightforward reading of how the mathematicians are talking about that is that they think those things are real. And then, you know, one way of understanding what naturalism is that you take what scientists do and the way that they talk about their subject matter as give it a kind of prima facie gloss as being, that's how we should just straightforwardly understand what they're saying and take it straightforwardly. We shouldn't gloss it according to our own like philosophy or something. Like if the mathematicians talk like this, that counts in its favor. It doesn't mean it necessarily have to all be that, but that's a naturalistic way of getting into being a realist. So you could be like, I'm an empiricist, I'm a naturalist, and I like mathematical objects for that reason.
Yeah, because they explain, or they're part of the explanation of what science is doing when it's explaining the real world. I think that was his general view. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Brian.
Yes. Hopefully I've got everybody now. And hopefully you can hear me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We can hear you, Brian.
Good. I know I'm late to the conversation and I've missed so much. And I hope we've distinguished between subjective and objective truths. But
I don't think we've got to that yet. But
we haven't?
I mentioned it in the opening.
Okay. But it just sounded to me what Alex was describing is truth as being a language, or rather maths as being a descriptive language, and extrapolating truth from that, or I may have misunderstood.
I think I was just now, just before.
Just then, yeah.
Just then I was talking about what I guess Arif Ahmed is a philosopher at Cambridge who Simon brought up a minute ago. We were speculating about what his view was about mathematical objects. And I said I can imagine him being a realist in this sense that some naturalists like to say, which is something along the lines of it seems integral to what mathematicians do to take numbers as real.
Oh, got you, right.
So we should probably just think that they probably are if we haven't any other reasons.
So you were extrapolating somebody else's viewpoint on something.
Yeah, but it's just a motivation I've heard before in a number of places with philosophers who like to naturalize the way they're talking about a subject matter. And what that means is to sort of talk like the way the experts talk about it and not like gloss it with a philosophy gloss that, spins, because you can imagine a philosopher who's got an angle who wants to run with idealism or something. And then when you say, well, what's going on in this physics paper over here? he could go, oh, look, line by line, I'm going to translate this. They say there's a particle there. What that actually means is there's an idea of a particle over here or something, right? And just rewrite the whole paper in their own terms. And this idea is that we shouldn't do that. We should, if the physicists are talking about an object, as philosophers, we should take what they're saying as the like prima facie way of understanding what's going on and not gloss it immediately into our own sort of pet theory. That's the idea.
So basically, the words that they're speaking actually mean what they mean, rather
what they seem like they mean.
What you might turn them into by viewing them through a lens.
Yeah, that's right. It's like there's two ways of in constitutional law, like where they think about the originalists, right? Where it's like what was in Jefferson's mind
what the
when he wrote
words
this,
say and what the words are supposed to mean.
Yeah, or the contextual where you're thinking about it
Yeah.
as like what do these words just mean today, like in common vernacular, like right now,
bringing it up to date, as it were.
Yeah. So in this case, it's like we're supposed to do something akin to just reading it as if like just using the words as they mean, as we commonly use them or something. Anyway, whatever. That was just something I could imagine.
But that was
being his justification.
extrapolating from what somebody else might.
Yeah. Definitely.
All right. Gotcha. Yeah. I think I'm up to speed now. I think. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me mention all these because I think some of y'all might have missed it in the opening. I mentioned correspondence theory, coherence theory, to idealism, pragmatic views, deflationary theory, which is linguistic, and then the difference between objective and subjective. If you had any views on any of those.
Yes, and what do you mean by tin? Do you mean the shape or do you mean the material? Sorry, that's my humor.
So what were the other ones that you missed, Xbox?
That we haven't brought up?
Busy. Yeah, I'm just busy going through chat right now, so that's why I'm instead.
Oh no, I just went through the list of.
Oh, you've already been through it. Sorry.
Of views, a handful of views. I mean, there's more views, but that was just a handful. And most people take today the correspondence theory. Like a lot of philosophers, at least through the 20th century, will hang on to that.
Pretty much that's what I use, but again, it depends on the conversation though, because it can change between conversations.
Yeah, I think correspondence theory of truth is one of those ones that everybody, I think, assumes that it's the right theory when you first start thinking about it.
Generally speaking, yes, but you can, there's so many nuances to the wording though.
Yeah, that's right. It dies a death of trying to be specified, it seems to me. Sounds great when you first specify it. When you first say, oh, it's that which corresponds to reality or whatever. And that's fine. But can start to consider some of these kind of strange cases where if you say something like I want to say something like, the cat is on the mat, right? What's going on is there's this object, a cat, and there's another object, a mat, and there's a relationship that they have. One of them's on the other one, right? And that's what's going on. That's how it corresponds. As long as reality has those features, my proposition obviously has those things in it. And, there's a word, two noun phrases, right? And a word that tells me which one is on the other, right? So as long as reality matches that kind of grammatical structure, then it's fine. We can say it corresponds. Like that's what we mean. But now if I say something like, there are no dinosaurs in existence, right? Well, show me what structure should reality have, right? That matches that grammatical structure now, because I'm not saying the cat is on the mat where there's an object that corresponds to the noun phrase, a cat. Now I'm saying there are no dinosaurs, right? So there is no object that corresponds to that noun phrase. So what's being related to what? How is reality supposed to correspond to that sentence? It's not at all clear. So like, and those complicated examples multiply. Honestly, ask philosophers about this. There's tons of these, hundreds of these sorts of things where it's not clear what's going on in the correspondence theory. So I like the idea of it, but I just can't see how it's ever going to work.
Wouldn't a statement like Darth Vader's Luke Skywalker's father be a true statement that doesn't conform to reality?
Well, yeah, right. So what do we say about that? So you could say something like, there's a thing called the fiction of Star Wars, and according to that fiction, whatever, Vader is Luke's dad or something, right? And then what we're saying is that like it's somehow the words written on the script or something make that true, because when we're saying according to the fiction of Star Wars or something, we ground it out like that. But maybe I don't know, maybe but still I think so the question of like what we've done is like I gave an example where it's the example talked about something that doesn't exist, dinosaurs, but you've given an example about something which is fictional, so it's like it couldn't exist really. Like Star Wars isn't actually a possible thing, it's an impossible, we know it's not really gonna, it isn't like could be true or something. And I think that just sort of complicates it a bit. I mean, you're absolutely right about it. It's just to make the point more simply without the complicating factor of like, how do we handle reference to fictional objects? Because that's an interesting sort of nearby question. Just the simple point is that all you need to critically wound the correspondence theory is just one of these, what they call these negative existentials. So it's a phrase that says there is no whatever, no beer in my fridge, or no dinosaurs on my street, or whatever. And just a simple phrase like that doesn't need to involve reference to fiction, which is just complicated in a different sense. And I think already the correspondence theory is struggling to know what to do at this point.
That's something else I never thought about either before. That's interesting.
There are no bad questions, just poorly worded ones.
Oh yeah, that's actually probably a problem with a lot of things. There's just our language.
So does this mean that the theists have got it right? In fact, that because we can't ground
No.
truth, therefore we can't even accept reality?
Oh no.
Oh
As a-
no!
Then you have to get into a meta-analysis of God's view of truth and
And
where
surely
he
is-
grounds it.
I
Surely,
was
as
going to
Alex
throw a spanner in the works with the contextual truth as a concept.
surely, as Alex said, if you're going to ground truth in God, you're already presupposing there's a truth to ground truth in, which does
Yeah.
seem to be a bit silly, doesn't it?
I would say the same thing about the contextual move as well, because, it has to be, it's no point appealing to a context unless you're going to say something like, but it's true in this context, that's why I'm appealing to it, right? Why else appeal to it? But then that's just blatantly presupposing some notion of truth as it applies to that context in the first place.
Well, you've
Right.
you've got things that are true in a particular context, but if you put them in a different context, then they're not true.
Yeah, right. So that the point is
So-
you've got a notion of truth
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, but then
built
then
into
wouldn't
the notion
wouldn't
of what's
that
contextual?
wouldn't that suggest that context is very much required to determine a truth?
I think it tells you the other way around. It tells you that you need a notion of truth before you can talk about what's true in one context and not true in another.
Or even what a context is, I guess.
Well, that,
Yeah, what is
well,
a context?
Yeah,
What is the
context?
reality of a context? Well,
What
that's
does
where
it
my
mean to be a context?
that's where my biological reductionism comes in. Yeah, if you have a context, you have a couple of organisms, right? If you have one organism, and like a fiction is something that exists as something that's going on between a number of organisms, right? And they make squeaky
But then
noises about, Darth Vader.
But then
I'm such
now
a
you set
reductionist.
your view up as if you are God. and you're grounding this truth in your context.
Well, for me, I am like sort of a thing at the center of the locality that I'm walking around in, but I certainly wouldn't go as far as thinking I'm God, depending on what substance. Depending on what substance I've consumed.
No, I like talking about grounding of this, because that I only see a few possibilities on any of the views of grounding. Would be some sort of infinite regress, a circle, or I'm just presupposing it, stating it. Just I'm not sure what other options we have there.
So you're talking about this notion that like something is so we say something like proposition P is true, and that is grounded in reality being a certain way, right? Like if I say this proposition is the cat is on the mat, right, and that's true. Well, if you want to say that it's grounded in something, then that means that like you're saying that reality being in a certain way, like the cat being in this position and not the mat being on top of the cat, etc., right? That those things being in that way is what grounds the truth, or it makes it true. It's like a truth-making idea, that reality being in a certain way makes a proposition true or something. That's what grounding is like. And you're asking, can there be chains of grounding? So like this proposition is grounded in reality being a certain way, but reality being a certain way is also something that you could express with a proposition. So you're saying P is grounded by some other proposition Q. Well, what about Q? Is that grounded in some further proposition R? And if so, does that just go down forever? Is it just one proposition grounding another forever, or does it stop, or does it go in a circle? That's what you're asking, right?
When it comes to the cat and the mat, you have to presuppose the existence of a cat and the existence of a mat, and you have to have them defined as to what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I suppose they could be amorphous, but you have to at least presuppose their existence, otherwise the sentence is meaningless.
Yeah, that's right. The meaning of the sentence, in a way, is to refer to those objects. So if I said the cat is on the mat and that's true, then what that means is there actually is a cat over there somewhere, and it actually is on a cat. And that so the way the sort of semantic role that those words play is by pointing at the objects that they refer to, among other things. They might also do other things, but they at the very least point. So if I say this is a glass of beer, whatever, when I say this, that actually is supposed to be an arrow that sort of points you at the glass or the thing I'm looking at or that I'm trying to refer to or something. So there's this kind of language has like two aspects to it. On the one hand, there's sort of meaning in a soft sense. Like if I say, he's gay or something, and it doesn't mean he's happy, it means he's homosexual. There's all these sort of contextual, like cultural things or whatever. As on the one hand, that's kind of meaning. And then reference, on the other hand, is just like, which objects are the things that the arrows are pointing at?
In the context of truth, with regards the gay comment, both meanings of the word gay could be equally true.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, because you could you could be happy and homosexual, of course.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's possible, of course.
Exactly. So
those two things are not in competition with each other whatsoever.
They're not, absolutely not exclusive to each.
But what's different? So you can have two like sort of alternative cultural readings of a term, right? Absolutely, right? Just like that, and sometimes they compete with each other. So it's not clear which one of them it means in a given like cultural setting where people are using a word in a certain way, whatever. But the distinction I was drawing was that on the one hand, you've got meaning like that, right? Which is socially decided and is fluid and blah, blah, blah. And then on the other hand, you've got reference, which is not the same type of thing. It's just the objects that words stand for. So, like when I say, that's my coat or something, like I'm not trying to tell you anything about cultural meanings or anything. Right, I'm just identifying that. Like if you're saying, we're at a party, all the coats are on a bed, it's my time to go, and you say, I'll just grab your coat for you. Which one is it? looking at the coats and I say, that's my coat, right? I'm not telling you anything about it apart from that that's the one. Like over there, this, I just identify the object. And all that's going on in that is reference. It's not about the meaning of the coat, what it means to me, what coat means in Finnish, or, you know, what, anything like that. It's just that I'm just pointing at the object. And that does seem to me just different. Like you can't really have, maybe they both operate at the same time, but they're just like different aspects to what's going on when I speak and point at and talk about things. You know, like sense and reference effectively is a distinction.
Yeah.
Could I just take us back a little bit?
Sorry. Yeah,
because
sorry.
there was something interesting that sparked into my mind when you were talking about, you know, this definitional thing being sort of circular, I guess, and how to get out. You can't really get out of that problem, if you like. And
okay, like the notion of truth being presupposed in something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So, you know, it occurred to me something that I'd read, and I think it was on your blog post, which is why I'm bringing it up. And I could be wrong because I couldn't find it anywhere else, I think, which was the idea that induction isn't circular. And I guess we're just moving to epistemology here, but yeah, could you just talk about the fact that maybe induction isn't circular and why? Not that it's not kind of obvious when you look at it, but I'd never seen it said elsewhere other than your blog post, so I always wanted
what did I say?
to ask you this.
Did I say that? I don't remember.
It was a very short piece in one sentence where you said something like, yeah, I think induction isn't circular by definition.
Oh, yeah, okay. I think it's ringing a bell because I think there was some like presup, like
That's right, yes.
thing about that where they were trying to say that, oh yeah, that I think it was something like, look, on presup view, you know, okay, so look, the standard problem of induction is supposed to be this issue where like, if you want to say that you think the future is going to be like the past because of some experience that you had in the past, then that's just like sort of begging the question, because it's like that evidence is only going to be applicable to the future if the future is like the past, right? Which is the thing we're supposed to be justifying in the first place. So this kind of Humean issue about problem of induction, well rehearsed, right? I guess you've heard this before, so we don't need to belabor that. Yeah. So then these precepts were saying, well, that's just a problem for atheists, because if you're a Christian, or at least a Calvinist who believes exactly the right things or whatever, then you don't have that issue because God has guaranteed that the future will be like the past, at least I guess in some respects, or enough like the past to be useful. So it's not begging the question for them. So checkmate atheists, right? I guess that's the challenge that is supposed to be there. But basically the problem, I guess, is just that it doesn't what they're doing doesn't solve the problem for anybody. So like to the extent that there's a question begging issue, it is sort of just fundamental that everybody's going to be stuck with like Hume's dilemma in the first place. So like, you know, imagine, so let's just suppose God exists, right? And that presup is true. So that like we all believe that God exists, and just the righteous or the unrighteous in his heart tells himself that God doesn't exist, blah, 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 right? All that stuff. And logic is only what it is because God makes it that way, and whatever their view is. That's cool. So now let's suppose we're doing an experiment and, you know, we like, I don't know, do something, just drop some liquid into a test tube with something in and it goes purple or whatever. And then we set everything up again, and we do it again and it goes purple again. We think, sweet, this looks like it might be the beginning of a new scientific discovery. Let's do it again. Oh, it goes purple again, sweet. And we start thinking to ourselves, maybe every time you put these two substances together, it goes purple. Maybe that's like a new law of nature that we've just discovered, right? Or maybe it's just coincidence and that like it only does that one every 15 times. It just happened to do it every time that we put water in, right? You can't tell at this point between those two. So maybe it's a law of nature and we've made a scientific discovery, or maybe it's just coincidence and we're just getting carried away with ourselves, right? So how do we know which one of those it is? Right? That's basically the problem of induction, because what you're saying is like, the past has been like this up till now, right? Will it continue to be like that? Will the future be like the past has been up till now? In this respect, specifically about this potion being put into this test tube, right? But the problem is, even if God give the precept everything they want, right? Unless in the Bible somewhere it says that if you put this thing in this test tube, it makes it go purple. Unless it explicitly tells you that, or God like came to you in a dream and told you that explicitly, neither of which they're going to want to say. Like, you still don't know, right, whether what you've got is a law of nature or a coincidence. So like, you're in exactly the same situation as the atheist or anybody else. So I guess that was my point with that. I think is it's like, you know, in that sense, just putting God in the picture and claiming that he's told you everything in the Bible, you still don't know most of the time whether something's going to be a law of nature or not.
Is it not special pleading as well to put God in this category? I mean, if everything we're familiar with needs a guarantor, then why doesn't God need a guarantor to be consistent within himself?
Well, that's true. From our point of view as well, you wouldn't know whether God, you know, so God's guaranteed the laws of nature every day up till now. How do we know he's going to do it tomorrow? Right? You don't know. Maybe God's going to change. Right? He's been honest up till now, but maybe he's going to be deceptive from tomorrow onwards. Right? We just don't know. So you'd be in the same situation then, even if you knew there was an agent that was controlling everything. Because that shows you the problem is deeper than, like, the real problem is it's an epistemological problem. And you can't solve it by just positing that some entity exists. Right? And that's what's going on. So no metaphysics is going to get you out of this one.
Okay, so that kind of reminds me of something that you said in a debate once with Darth, a long time ago now. But I think you were saying something like, you know, it could be that you just luckily have logic, right? You just come across logic one day, just by accident, right? Or whatever, by randomness, I guess. And then he said, oh, you can't do that because it would be random. And I think you said something like, well, it doesn't matter because I would have logic then. Right, so randomness could ground logic, I think was your point. I don't think he really understood that or wanted to admit that was the point.
It sounds like a Polish thing.
Yeah, I think it was a Polish thing. But actually, like, I thought it worked well for the uniformity of nature as well. Because it could just be that all events are completely random, but we just happen to live in a space where all the events look like they're uniform. Right? And it could just be a very long line. I mean, it doesn't have to be infinite. It could just be a very large number of events happening. And we just happen to be in a space where they all look like they follow each other in some law-like manner, right?
That's right. Like the turkey that gets fed every day up until Christmas or whatever.
Right. And that's
like, this is the time I exist when I can talk to you. Right? Like
what, sorry? Say that again.
I said, like, this is just this is the time that I exist and talking to you. And I mean, that's just one of the odds of infinite time and everything happening. And it's going to happen again at some point.
Right. In which case,
may be different.
In which case, it's not circular for that reason, then, is it? Because we're not claiming that it is a uniformity of nature. It just appears that way. Right, and that I guess, does that get around the problem of induction? In fact, or not just get around it? I shouldn't say that because it doesn't get around it. But
no, it doesn't get around it because all you're saying is like what you have to do is say that these things appear to be uniformities of nature. Like any experiment that anyone's ever done, any extrapolations to, like, you know, laws of physics, Einstein's equations, all of that is obviously tempered with some level of, like, you know, this is all tentative and might all be false. If we find out tomorrow that stuff has been measured wrong, this is all right. None of it's like absolute. It could all go tomorrow, right?
That's and the reason for that is the presupposition that all of physics is founded on. And that is the presupposition that our observations are an accurate reflection of reality.
Well, they're the litmus test for what's an accurate, what's accurate.
Yeah,
and
the
what's not.
experimentation is how we actually test that.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think
Which-
science takes that for granted just quite as much as you might think. For instance, I'm red-green colorblind, and I used to think that snooker tables were red until I was about 12.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, but that kind of makes the point, because your observation of reality was true for you.
yeah, but it wasn't true in a scientific way.
No,
Right, you could measure
no.
the
what
what is it?
but as
the
far
waves
as
of
far as your experience of it, yeah, the qualia aspect of it.
There you go. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
see,
I'm
that's-
red-green
that's-
colorblind as well, right? Yeah.
That's the nice thing. You've got the quanta of things and you've got the qualia of things.
Time for a red cup, Mike.
Again,
But like whatever, isn't that just like using the word truth in a different sense though? Like, I mean,
Well,
like whatever's
goes
true
back
for
to
me is
objective and
Subjective truth,
subjective truths. Because there are truths that are subjective.
yeah.
And
So
those-
I think that I don't agree that that's so. I think that with those objective and subjective truths, it's just one notion of truth. But what's different about them is whether or not
It's how you experience it.
Yeah. One of them involves experience necessarily, and the
Yeah.
other one doesn't, right? So
And the
like,
way that Lucky was experiencing green was as red. But
well,
that
but
was
so-
Lucky's
maybe
truthful
we
experience
experienced it
of
brown.
green.
yeah,
But look, when I experience green, right, I'm not colorblind. When I experience green, I experience it a given way, right? You could say that my experience is true to me, whatever that means, but that's just
Right.
true. It doesn't matter what my experience, whether it's colorblind,
shove it
whether
in
I
our
can
face.
see at all, anything. Yeah, it's like any experience I have is true to me, right? So it's a sort of vacuousness. It doesn't tell me anything. How can I have an experience that's false to me? What does that even mean?
Right.
Well,
That's why I brought up the dreams earlier. If you missed me talking about that.
Right. So because in a dream, that's an example where like, everything's true for you. So even a dream,
Right.
like reality would be true for me in that sense. But it's not actually true, but everything's true for me if I experience it or something. So it just seems like it's just
Right.
another way of
Yeah.
describing like I'm having this experience and we're saying that's true for me just means
Yeah,
I'm having
exactly.
this experience. And I think we should just drop using the word true because it's confusing. Because on the other hand, there's a sort of
Well, that-
philosophical notion of what's true. And then we just like using the word true to describe something completely different from that. That's just about I am experiencing X or something. Right? It just seems to be
But
confusing
then-
things. To the
but,
truth.
we are in a discussion, but the topic is truth, and
Mm,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
a type of truth.
Yeah, people do use the word that way. That's right. And I think it's confusing and they should stop doing it.
I do.
But if
I don't
Lucky
like when
takes-
people say their truth.
if Lucky takes the truth, basically the color one way, it's because Lucky is in relationship to whatever he's looking at that puts off those particular light waves, right? And we might do it differently, but then we're in a relationship. So truth is always about us being in a relationship with something.
yeah, but
Yeah,
science really
And if
tries
you're
to-
if you're looking,
science is trying to remove that relationship to some sort of neutral ground. I don't think it can, but it's certainly trying to bypass the relationships we have as individuals. Surely,
Yeah, but I mean, there would still be the
We-
colored light basically reflecting off the thing, even if neither of you were there. But then when you're talking about truth, when we come up with truth and propositions, we're always talking about us in relation to some action we're taking with something out there, right?
But
So it always
when we're
involves us.
talking about so if I say that Pythagoras' theorem is true, how's that related to me taking an action?
Because if you say it's true,
Discovered
okay.
it? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, well, it could be an imaginary action, or it could be a action that you haven't even proposed yet. It's some sort of knowledge that you have about the world but it can play in an action if you want to lay out a garden in a certain way, right? And you got stakes and ropes and whatever. You may use the theorem, but
Yeah.
the reason that we come up with this knowledge is because we take those kinds of actions, right?
But
the reason
I
that
thought you-
Pythagoras came up with the thing is he was measuring stuff, right?
Absolutely, that's true. He didn't think about it because he
Okay.
just thought, I just want to think of a mathematical
Right.
object. On the other hand, there's
But
plenty
then-
of mathematical theorems where they did exactly that, right? They weren't doing
Right.
Just
mathematical
about to
problems,
say,
but-
there is a lot of maths that's derived exactly that way.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, we
right.
can go
And-
further. We can go further. You know, we can take it, you know, we can end up with these really abstract forms of mathematics like category theory and whatever that
Yeah,
are,
exactly.
way the hell out there.
Set theory.
But I think where we start is with, like numbers. I did this whole video on, Jay Dyer had this thing about 7 coconuts. And I did this whole video explaining the realism of the number 7 with coconuts on an island and all that. It was amazing.
But just to go back a moment, I thought, Mike, that you were taking yourself to say something important about the notion of truth, which was that it's always about entities or even organisms, you said, that are in relationships with each other.
Yeah,
and taking
organisms.
actions or something. But then I gave an
Organism-
example of a purported truth. It didn't seem to have any organisms doing actions, just a pure geometric truth. And in reply to
Yeah.
that, you said that something like, well, I could imagine a way of organisms acting, which would be, banging tent pegs into a triangle shape or something, right? But it sounds like it's moving the goalpost a little bit, because, I mean, it starts to sound a little bit less profound if what you're saying is there's this thing about truth, which is that any sentence you give me that's true, I can imagine a possible situation that's very loosely related to that, where there's some organisms doing something. It doesn't sound
Yep,
very impressive when you put it like that. Do you know what I mean?
I see what you mean. There's like almost like 2 different versions or two different varieties of truth. But there's like with the electrons and having the triangular relationship, I would say that that's true in reality, because I can abstract myself out of the picture, right, and think about it. But when it comes to color, how I'm perceiving color, there's some truth there, but the part of that truth is inside of what I am as an organism. If I am colorblind, right, that's going to be part of that whole physical reality. So I still adhere to the absolute physical reality of where things are in space and time.
How is color different when you, like, if I say there's a red apple or something,
right
now try and imagine the situation without imposing subjective experiences on there. As a sort of science guy, aren't you going to say, well, what it means is the frequency, average frequency, whatever, of the light bouncing off the skin of the apple is that within this band of whatever, so many 100 gigahertz or I don't know anything, right?
Yeah,
But something
that would,
like that. That's what red is, right? So don't you have a handy reduction that doesn't presuppose experience there for red quite easily? Like, how is color actually different to anything else?
That would be the scientific version of truth. What waves are actually bouncing off that thing, right? But then when it comes to how Lucky perceives it, okay, there's also a truth about what's in his neurons, which synapses are doing what, that is going to enter into the truth of what color it is.
It's not.
It sounds like it's a bit more
I
of
don't
the
see a
same story,
contradiction.
isn't it? No,
What's that?
so that's right. So, but there's some story which involves photons hitting the apple and then bouncing off with a frequency, right? But the story doesn't end there, because then what happens is that they enter your eye, they interact with the retina or whatever, then the signal gets translated into neuron, electro, blah, 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 whatever, right? Keep telling me how far the story goes, but you have to at some point jump a chasm into talking about qualia, right? You don't get to, you can tell me as much sort of neuro whatever story as you like, but unless you've solved some big hard problem of consciousness, I mean, okay, so you don't think there's any qualia at all, right? It's just photons bouncing around. And
kind of an illusionist about qualia in the mind. Well, I don't know. Illusionism is often misunderstood, but anyway, we probably shouldn't get off on that topic. That'll be okay. Okay. I'm a semi-illusionist, I think. I don't know what the hell that means.
You only like. Who are the two guys? The two illusionists? You only like one of those two guys. Where you probably you only like the one that didn't get eaten by the tiger.
Yes.
Siegfried and Roy.
Siegfried and Roy, yeah.
Siegfried and Roy, that was it.
Mike's not really there. We're just projecting him into our consciousness.
Yeah, we're just projecting him. Well, Simus, you know how many drugs I've done in my life, so.
Yeah, if only
Don't
we could match that. None of us have the
Don't listen
constitution
to
that
me.
you do.
And God didn't show up and talk to him, so I'm really
No,
doubting
he
these trances and
Still-
everything else.
I invite him
welcome,
every
Scott.
week.
There's Scott. Hey, Scott.
Well,
And they're
Simus
talking about-
knows my views and my epistemology, so he knows I'm just punishing myself at this point.
Did somebody mention the shroud?
Don't. No. Alex, can I ask Alex a question, if he doesn't mind?
Go for it.
Alex, I hear a lot of people of a certain ilk who use laws of logic and logic as interchangeable. That simply isn't the case, is it?
No, I. Do you know what? Laws of logic is quite an antiquated term.
Principles of logic.
Principles of logic is a bit better, yeah, but I mean,
Okay.
it presupposes the method you get from Euclid, where you've got like axioms, and then you've got like 5 postulates in Euclidean geometry, and that's been a kind of like blueprint for how people thought about laws in mathematics, in physics, in all sorts of things, right? That they're these things you find, and they're like chiseled into the mountainside or something. You find the law of non-contradiction, so like something like up there. But in more modern contexts, in logic in particular, when logic became sort of mature in the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, it just became a thing where you can show that 2 systems are equivalent to one another, even if the axioms that they have are different. So what that means is that if you just take a straightforward like propositional logic, like the sort of logic like P and Q, if and only if, blah, 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 straightforward baby logic like that, it's possible to have, for instance, a law of non-contradiction as an axiom. That is a sentence that's true but not provable from any other truths, or derivable without any other propositions. You can have that as an axiom, or you can have it as something that's not an axiom, it's derived from other things, right? It's up to you. They're actually just equivalent ways of axiomatizing it. So what's an axiom and what isn't is not something that's objective. Like nothing hangs on that. It's just a kind of stylistic choice, where if you want the law of non-contradiction to be an axiom, you can have it as an axiom. But if you want it to be a theorem, you can have it as a theorem instead. It's up to you. It doesn't actually make any difference to any logic that you would do. So what the point is that instead of thinking about laws of logic, it's more about thinking about systems of logic. Like propositional logic is what it is, regardless of which sentences you take to be axioms and which ones you take to be theorems. So it's for that reason that it's an antiquated way of looking at it. It just sort of doesn't understand logic like kind of as it is these days, I think.
I think that would probably include me after that answer, to be honest. But I'll let somebody else upload.
Isn't the law terminology ultimately from Aristotle?
I don't know that that's right, actually. I think there's this idea that there's the Aristotelian laws of logic, right? People had this like non-contradiction, exclude middle identity. But Aristotelian, when people say Aristotelian logic, what they mainly mean is syllogistic logic, right? Which is this astonishing creation of Aristotle, right? As logic didn't exist as a formal study before Aristotle, as far as the history books show us anyway. And the first time it comes on the scene, Aristotle gives us like a fully formed logical system with proof theory. It's absolutely insane how much of a jump out of like ex nihilo from no logic to there being a full proof theory and a system is absolutely insane achievement. Anyway, in that system, which is what most people mean by Aristotelian logic, there's no identity symbol, right? There is no law of identity. You can't even say the law of identity, right? So I don't know what they mean by these things coming from Aristotle. Obviously, he defends the law of non-contradiction as a metaphysical principle in the book called The Metaphysics, like book 4, I think. But in another book that he has called On Interpretation, he advances arguments against the law of excluded middle, right? This is famous sea battle argument about whether if there will be a sea battle tomorrow, then there's nothing I can do now to stop it because it's already true that there will be a sea battle, etc. Right? So in order to avoid that kind of fatalism, he says it must be the case that it's neither true nor false today that there will be a sea battle tomorrow, right? Denying that principle. So it seems to me that out of the 3 principles, one of them literally isn't formable in Aristotelian logic, right? One of them he explicitly rejects himself. Okay, the third one he endorses, but like this is complete myth that those 3 laws come from Aristotle. Complete myth.
That's interesting. I actually didn't know he intended the sea battle argument to be against the law of excluded middle. I thought that was like
absolutely.
Yeah, I was under the false impression that like it was later logicians who like rejected it as a solution to the whole conundrum. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's one of those things. It's one of those passages that's been debated for like literally 2,000 years. So there's all these different views on it, right? So obviously, some people don't think that's what he's up to. So Hintika in the 60s has a paper where he defends that. And Hintika is a fantastic philosopher, and his stuff on Aristotle is really interesting because he like reads Greek. I think he reads some like Arabic as well. So there's like loads of. Anyway, point is, there are people who don't agree with what I just said, but what I just said is the sort of the historical consensus. That's what he's up to in those passages.
Do you think, just as a by the by, and a quick yes or no will be probably sufficient here, but do you think that the dialectics, or the dialectical process that I guess hinted at, well, Plato uses in some of his books, and I guess was picked up from Socrates, do you think that that's like a form of a pre-logical kind of hint at logic happening, that the process of reasoning between people in a questioning format?
Definitely, so, that's right, absolutely.
Okay.
So yeah, you wanted a yes/no answer. So yes.
I did, yeah. So, I kind of knew the answer, so I guess I wanted more, but no, that's fine because there is.
I mean, there is more, right?
Like we know where he got it from. Then anyway,
there's the distinctive kind of Aristotelian method of proof, right? Is proof by contradiction. So you assume P, right? If from that assumption it follows, some contradiction follows, like Q and not Q, right? If that logically follows from P, then you can chuck P away because P must be false because it implies a contradiction, right? That's the kind of core Aristotelian inferential pattern, and you can see that in a previous generation where you have people talking about like Zeno's paradox, right? So with the, like the tortoise and the hare, whatever, those types of arguments, they use reduction to contradiction informally, right? You sort of just see that like this, if this and this and that, then he's never going to catch up with him, and that must mean that like blah 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 is impossible. Like it's using that same pattern, but what Aristotle does is takes the way people were reasoning around each other, at the time informally, and turns it into a kind of formal science, beginning the first couple of steps of like taking it out of the context, like the street or the classroom or whatever, and putting it into something non-contextual, like abstract, and that begins that makes logic begin basically by doing that.
Right. I mean, that's also, I guess, similar then to what Pythagoras was doing when he was coming up with general proofs and theorems, right?
That's right. So like the way that you can imagine people informally measuring plots of land with bits of string or whatever, and then that over time turns into rules of thumb, which turns into like generalizable patterns of reasoning, etc., etc. So yeah, they all come out of like practical everyday things. Is what people were doing before they did logic, is doing things that logic was later on very helpful for them to do more efficiently. So we found, you know, so I think from my point of view, even if you think those things are real and not like constructions or whatever, if you're a Platonist about that type of stuff, you can still like agree that they, you know, there's this pragmatic kind of like home where these ideas and everything like originate from. We don't just sort of like discover maths fully formed out of nothing. We're organisms first and foremost who are doing things. I mean, I completely agree with all of that stuff. It's just that like what I think happens is that after a while, fortunately, the things like reasoning processes and stuff that we used informally to whatever catch prey better and survive more and blah blah blah, those things enabled us to sort of brush up against and become familiar with things like that eventually went on to become mathematics and logic and geometry and stuff, that we then became able to see them for what they were over time and became like, oh, we've been doing maths this whole time or whatever. But you don't understand it at the beginning, but with the benefit of thousands of years of hindsight, we're starting to sort of, it's becoming into view kind of what we were grappling with.
It's a quick question, because I can't recall off the top of my head. Given all of the rotational mathematics that we were doing as a species without knowing that we were doing it, with regards movements in the sky of these of stars and what have you, because we needed to be doing that to navigate, as well as once we started farming, we needed that for crops, and we probably also needed it for migration and other navigation as well. Oh, I mentioned navigation, but does anybody happen to know when that sort of mathematics was formalized? Was it the Akkadians or the?
Well, okay, so Pythagoras happened to have travelled before he came up with his theorem.
Yeah, it was a long time before
around the Middle East in general, and Egypt especially. And Egypt is famous for having plotted out the different types of right-angle triangles that you could get. But they already had a good,
they already had a good grasp of maths.
Yeah, and then also I think the Babylonians also had mathematical texts have been found, schoolboy texts, which have trying to find or define the square root of 2, for instance. So I think most of that was understood understood.
The base 60 maths.
Before. Sure. But most of that had been understood before Pythagoras actually came out. And I think the thing which is a tribute to Greeks in history is the formalization and the generalization of it. And that's what makes Pythagoras' work so impressive, and also Euclid, of course, a bit later on. I want to get Kafai in here because he's come in for a short while. And
absolutely. But I just wanted to get it because it was there about
thank you for that,
and the time of day and stuff.
Brian, thank you for that. I think if you go down that rabbit hole, you'll find that mathematics has been practiced all the way to the times of ancient India and Hinduism, and it depends on how far you want to go back and what you consider primitive elementary mathematics into complex mathematics and so forth.
Exactly.
Where do you draw the line? No, Alex, before you go, I know you said your time is short. I'm curious as to what led you to be interested in the Greek philosophers, especially like Aristotle in the first place. I know Aristotle is responsible for the cosmological argument. Was that your wedge in, or did you have other interests aside from that? I'm curious.
Well, so my first ever introduction to philosophy at all was that I think I found a book on a bookshelf in my parents' house that was called The Great Philosophers. It was, I think, one of my dad's books, right? Don't think he'd read it very much, but he had it on the shelf. So my dad was like a sociology professor. Or it was a sociology professor when he worked. So he had stuff like that kicking around. Anyway, and I opened it up and started reading chapter 1, which was about Socrates, and just sort of identified with him a bit because he was, I mean, you know, he was a bit scruffy and didn't take a lot of stuff that seriously that other people did, liked to talk about abstract things instead of getting on with practical things, whatever. Kind of just felt a bit like, oh, you know, it's a bit like me if I'm obviously a much better version than me, but like had traits that I identified with. And it just intrigued me. So it was just a simple case of like identifying for sort of trivial character-based reasons with Socrates at the beginning. It just got me sort of interested in philosophy, I think. I don't have a like massive interest in the Greeks in particular. You just kind of pick it up after a while, though, you know. And I'm not a massive Aristotle fan in particular either, but I did go through a phase of getting really into the history of logic. I actually have a book about the history of logic that I edited, which is like 15 chapters of scholars writing chapters about different bits of the history of logic. So I got well into it. Sorry, do I know what? Sorry, what prompted that?
What prompted you to go into the logic out of it, like just to?
Well, that happened when I handed my PhD in, and I had like a summer with nothing to do basically, and
right on.
I got into this topic, and basically I had this harebrained idea about how, like obviously you've seen a Venn diagram before, right, where it's two circles overlapping, and then it's to explain the notion of like the intersection and the difference and blah blah blah. And then you've probably also seen these ones where it's like that, but it's three circles overlapping with each other, and that's an Euler diagram, right? So it's a creation of the 17th, 18th century mathematician Euler, and what he's doing there is actually a way of explaining how Aristotelian syllogisms work, because it's about how you have these three terms in the premises and the conclusion and how they interact with each other, basically. And there's a whole kind of landscape of different Aristotelian syllogisms, and you can understand them as just systematically different variations over this picture that involves three circles overlapping with each other. And I had this idea that actually there's a more economical way of explaining what's going on than the Euler pictures. And I'd built a different system up, basically. And I got super into that, and it led me into reading about Aristotle's syllogistic stuff, and then just the history of logic. I think it was going around, there was a vibe at the time. People were thinking about it, and there was talks going on and stuff. And yeah, I just got into the idea of like, I think I organized a lecture course on it and then turned into a book, basically. That's what happened.
No, it's interesting.
Yeah, huge fan of your work, Alex. And, you know, I've read a lot of your stuff. I think this is the first time I've ever got to speak to you, but, you know, others in the room may be familiar with the stuff, topics that I'm interested in. A lot of mysticism, a lot of, mystical experience, especially amongst the Greek philosophers. And, you know, in my studies, I've noticed that Aristotle seemed to be an anomaly in that. So Plato, fully accepted the good and, characterized it in such a way. I don't know if you ever came across the term henosis. I'll write it in the private chat. But henosis was basically the Greek philosopher's term for contemplation, a kind of what, Zen Buddhists might engage with meditation. The Greek philosophers refer to it as henosis. And so I became very interested in, of course, Plato, Xenophanes, all the way to Plotinus. And yeah, Aristotle was kind of like something that's like a thorn that stood out because he was more, materialist, of course, intellectual. And so it's no surprise that, cosmological arguments came from his basis because, he wasn't trying to adhere to some kind of, profound divine intuition. Even though I don't think I would characterize him as atheist, I don't know if you would do that, but he tried to come up with a more logical way to reference the divine. And henosis. I'm sorry, someone. I'll write it in the main chat too as well.
It's all right. I've done that. You're good. Just carry on.
Okay, cool.
Oh.
Henosis became my primary focus with the ancient Greek philosophers, and to the degree that they were involved with that. For me, Aristotle was a unique case in that he was kind of born a ways from, his predecessors and his, the people that would follow him. He had his own time frame there, and he was kind of left to his own. I wouldn't say demise, but his own machinations to develop his own ideas that seemed unique to him. And so, that's the only reason I asked you that question. Like, out of curiosity, how did you come across that? So, in a way, I'm not surprised that you said, man, it just so happened to be a book that my parents had, and I landed on. But I don't know. Maybe there's more to it than that maybe you don't even realize. So, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, it's all right. So I think I'm sort of interested in mystical experience, but only probably, I don't know if it would be in a way that you'd accept, I think. But I think most of the time when people say they have, I just finished rewatching The Sopranos the other day, and there's a scene in the final series where the main character, Tony Soprano, takes ayahuasca or something with somebody and out in the desert, and he has an experience, and has some profound experience, right? But then later on, he sort of cautiously tries to tell his friends about it, and of course can't explain it properly. But it's not just that he can't explain it properly because they're men and men don't talk to each other, or it's because they're gangsters and they don't have a vocabulary. The point is that it was an ineffable experience. If whatever he had, it wasn't something that could be explained. There's no words that could capture it properly, right? You couldn't communicate that type of the depth of the experience that he had. But
because there was no common frame of reference.
Well, the point is that on the reading that what he's had is actually a mystical experience, right? Something spiritual and not just in his head or whatever. Then of course it would be ineffable, right? But also on the reading where it was just a chemical imbalance and it didn't mean anything and blah blah blah. Well, that's why you can't express it either, because it just isn't anything, right? He just thought that he had an experience, and that's all the drugs did. He didn't actually have one. He just thought he did. So there's two readings there. You'll never know which one is true, and he can't know which one is true either. And I just think that's what's going to happen with mystical experiences of any type you show me. I'm going to say that there's going to be two readings like that. But sorry, go on.
Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. But let me throw this out there. Everybody knows I had these experiences, but they were chemical imbalances. So more like a psychotic experience, but reality completely stripped from what was there, but it was replaced by something else. I spent years afterwards wrestling with that.
No,
what
that's perfect.
Actually happened and what didn't, and what was true and what wasn't. Some stuck as memories, and some faded just like a dream.
No, that's perfect way to describe it. Brian said there's no, ultimate frame of reference. And for the mystics, like Meister Eckhart said, the theologians may quarrel, but the mystics of the world speak the same language. So it's necessarily something that if you underwent this experience, then only you can understand it from that frame point. Otherwise, there is no words. Words pay no justice to what this experience is, especially if someone's never had the experience. And I kind of get that impression from you, Alex. And I'm not trying to be offensive. It's just that the way you come off as, trying to understand, these philosophical avenues through solely an intellectual level, whereas, the mystic goes towards this divine experience that it's direct and intuit for themselves. And of course, you're right that, if you haven't had it for yourself, then yeah, it's irrelevant. It makes no sense. You can't even try to parse.
I don't think I think even if you have the experience, you don't know yourself whether
I agree with
genuine
you.
or not.
Yeah, I agree with you that people, even if they have the experience, that they can never really put it into words. Maybe mystics
no, sorry, that's not what I mean. I'm saying that even if you go through the experience, you never really know if what you went through was a genuine mystical experience or if it was just your brain did something trivial and fooled you, right? You never know which one of those.
I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that.
So how can you tell the difference? Explain to me how that works.
Well, I mean, if you haven't been following all the studies, there's been decades and decades of research in this area regarding mystical experience, all the way back to the work of William James in the early 1900s that he wrote, and of course, even beyond that. But when we talk about neuroscientific evidence, a lot of the stuff that's been done with Tibetan monks or Carmelite nuns or with psychedelic-induced mystical experience, they have developed this kind of measurements that they can rely on to kind of discern the commonalities and universal principles that underlie this phenomenon in consciousness, because that's ultimately what it is. It's a phenomenon in consciousness that most people, mind you, may have not experienced, but nonetheless, there has been decades of research that can recognize certain features of this phenomenon and overlap them and recognize them as a kind of universal feature amongst this phenomenon that occur. Universal features, I'm sorry, like certain key characteristics that manifest in that phenomenon. And
but hold on. So I know what you're saying, right? But what's going on at best with what you're saying is the decades worth of research is that they are grouping symptoms together to form a kind of like to pick out the key features of what the hypothesis is a genuine mystical experience is taking place. But my question wasn't, is there any research that says, can we group these cluster of symptoms together around blah, blah, blah? I said, how can you tell from the first person point of view whether what you're having is a genuine mystical experience or your brain just fooling you? And I think you tried to say to begin with that you can answer that question, but clearly you can't, right? And the research you just picked out doesn't even begin to answer that question, because clustering the symptoms together isn't a way of saying whether the experience is genuine.
I think it's a kind of disingenuous to say we're clustering the symptoms together, because it does occur on a spectrum. And, even the professionals will point out that on the lower side of the spectrum, what they call partial mystical experience or archetypal visionary mystical experience, that, they can be unique to the individual, such that, if you grew up with Christianity, you may see Christ on the cross. If you grew up with, Islam or with Sufism, you might see Muhammad or Ganesh with Eastern philosophy, so on and so forth. However, on a broader generalized spectrum that they recognize that these experiences can fall on, they do call it a complete mystical experience or unitive. And it's no longer about your personal history or where you grew up from. It now becomes something, more universal to the individual. And to the degree that we can tease these things apart is a way that we can, recognize this phenomenon. So, I think when you say clump up, I think you're kind of conflating those two aspects. Whereas, the more profound mystical experiences, they're about a dissolution of ego, the dissolving of, boundaries of time and space, life and death. They become more about, not being able to recognize yourself amongst all the rest. It becomes a kind of fusion, a non-duality, as a lot of mystics say. It becomes more couched in that aspect. And,
the problem is much more profound than that. Look, any type of experience you want to name, like the experience of having my ego being broken down, or the boundaries of reality in some way being different to whatever, right? Sure. You name it, take your pick, right? I don't care about that, because whatever you say, you go, the characteristic feature of a genuine mystical experience is that it's X, right? It's got the dissolution of the ego, right? So if it's got a dissolution of the ego, you know it's a genuine, profound mystical experience. Otherwise, it's just some cheap trickery caused by drugs or some other explanation, right? That's not going to work, is it? Because for anything like that, like the dissolution of the ego, you could go through that same experience and still not know whether what was going on then was a genuine mystical experience or if that was just the consequence of a drug in the same way, right? How did you actually banish that doubt? You just said that if it's got this feature to it, then it's real.
Yeah. Well,
but like,
I mean,
why think that? Right?
Well,
You haven't actually explained that.
Okay, I would ask you, Alex. Like, I initially said that it sounded like you came from a more materialist vantage point. I don't think you looked into this stuff deeply enough, and I would challenge you to look into a lot of the studies that have been done that do recognize up to 6 characteristics that are undeniable for this phenomenon in consciousness. So it's not like we're just recognizing one aspect or the other. There's 6 criteria that the modern studies go by.
Kafai, could you just provide a link for us that I can put in the description?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Get this far. Thank you, I appreciate that.
So could I come into the middle here a little bit between Alex and Kafai? So Kafai and I have got a long history where I had a massive spiritual experience at the age of 15, not drug induced. It was just naturally induced, and I think. In some sense, when you have these experiences and you hear other people talk about them, you can relate to them in this ineffable way, so that you really believe that you're talking about the same kind of experience. But on the other hand, as you know, Kafai, I was an atheist before, during, and after my experience, so I didn't take away this metaphysical import. I think it's an actual thing that happens to a person's brain concerning the temporal lobe and the TPJ, temporal parietal junction. But there is something that happens. It's amazing when you run into other people. Like, anybody know who Nephilim Free is?
Of course.
Okay,
Everybody
he
here
had
knows
a real.
No, we don't know him.
yeah.
Right.
Enlighten us.
Okay. He had a real. He had a real spiritual experience that he told me about, and I can tell that he had the same experience I did, even though he's batshit crazy. And
when Jesus came in him.
That's not to say that these experiences don't have some naturalistic or at least psychological explanation. I mean, there have been plenty of explanations, but forward by psychologists to explain what's going on in these situations. And I think that the generalness that Kafai is talking about and the specificness and these 6 properties, could well be explained by the fact that we just have, we're interbred humans in sense, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, of course, there
the
could
thing
be
is,
a naturalistic
how can you
common
tell?
source.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't tell from the inside is the answer. There's not going to be a blueprint. Like, there's no way of knowing, really. If you're dreaming right now, you might be. And you can't say, oh, well, studies have shown that dreams are like this, so you can't be dreaming. Because that could be part of the dream, right? If the other hypothesis is true, you can't rely on those studies either. So, like, there isn't a way out from the inside of being able to tell whether you're dreaming or not. And of course, there's not going to be a way of telling from the inside whether an experience you're having is genuinely God beaming his voice down, telling you what Pythagoras' theorem is or whatever, as opposed to you having been spiked at a party without realizing it and be like tripping your tits off on LSD. You can't know from the inside which one of those is true, right? Obviously,
there could be a nucleus in your brain that makes you that when lit up makes you absolutely convinced that you're having a spiritual experience, and then you meet other people that have lit up the same nucleus. But I mean, it is a physical thing overall that happens to your brain. But the thing is that
it might be a genuine mystical experience that's all spiritual, not physical at all. Right?
No.
I don't know which one of those is true.
I do.
But I'm just saying you can't tell from the inside which one of those is true. Anyway, that's all that really.
Was there a way of telling from the outside?
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know what that means.
Well, your eyes are going around in circles when you're having a spiritual experience, I think, like on the cartoons.
Well, so I mean, it's kind of because you said like you can't really tell if you're dreaming or not. But presumably, you don't think you're dreaming right now. I mean,
no, if you put a person in
Inception.
an MRI while they're having one of these experiences, and I don't think they've caught one yet. I'm almost certain that they will see exactly what's happening in the
You're
brain.
talking about an fMRI, but yeah.
fMRI,
But
yeah,
right now,
it's detectable.
but right now, that could be part of the dream. Is they're
Yeah,
testing
that's
the
the point.
fMRI.
Well,
And I could wake
How do
up.
you tell that you're not dreaming?
I could wake up, or at least think I wake up, and
Brain in
in
a
my
vat.
dream. So how am I?
well, so this is the thing. This is the thing I was sort of curious about. If Alex could clarify. So, do you think like you're justified in believing that you're not dreaming, independent of any of this mysticism stuff?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Do I think I'm justified in believing that? Yeah.
Right. So you think? You think you can tell from the inside that you're not dreaming?
Well, I mean, so yeah, okay, fair point. So when I say that I think I'm justified in saying that, I think while it could be either, I can never really extinguish the hypothesis that I'm dreaming at any point. I just currently don't think that that's what's going on. Don't think I've necessarily got a great reason for that if you really push me to it.
Sure.
But nevertheless, I do quite confidently think I'm not dreaming right now. And so you could say I'm having this experience, my ego's being dissolved or whatever, and in a very similar situation, I'm just going to say, I don't really know why, but I just do very strongly think this is a mystical experience that's genuine and isn't a side product of like LSD or something. And fine, there you go. We go on our merry way, and there's no problem with that. I'm just saying, just like with the other skeptical things, you can never really be sure, right? You always got this in that you can't actually banish the thought that maybe it isn't real, and it's just I've been fooled. Right?
Yeah, I guess.
I
guess if it's something. I just want to say one thing very quickly, and then you can go. But if that's okay. But so I guess if it's not like if it's a sort of issue of like we can never really be absolutely certain from the inside that our experiences are veridical, and there's not really doesn't really mean anything to say that we'll check it from the outside. I mean, it seems more like a general point about fallibilism or something, not necessarily a point about like the veridicality of.
Well, yeah, okay, so that's true. I conceded fallibilism there, just so to be clear that I wasn't like helping myself to some epistemic standard I didn't expect the interlocutor to have, right? But I wasn't trying to say that all this is just merely acknowledge fallibilism and everything goes away, because the point is that when it comes to the mystical experience, I'm not clear what should even tilt the dial at all in favor of one thing or the other, right? Like, because it seems to me that saying something like, here's a list of common features that type of experience is like, isn't going to be the type of thing that could possibly guide me towards it being veridical rather than a hallucination of some type, right? Like, just try and think to yourself, I'm going to look at something looks like a glass of beer, right? Is it really a glass of beer or is it a hallucination, right? And then imagine I said to you, I'll provide you with a list that you'll be able to use to determine whether it's real or not. And then you look at the list, and on the list it says stuff like if it's really bubbly and if it's yellow and if it smells nice or whatever. Like those things aren't going to be able to tell you if it's real or not, because they're just other things inside that are just epistemically equivalent to that thing, right? Like none of them is a good guide to the other. So none of them tell you if there's anything sort of beyond them, which is what the point is supposed to be. Is it's really a glass, right? And how could any list of internal things like that ever do that type of job? Was my point. It's more than just appealing to fallibilism. It's because my point was that those types of conditions couldn't play that role.
I mean, if you'll permit, I maybe want to try to sort of see if I understand.
Real quick, I think this distinction might work better for you, man.
Well, can I just see if I understand the spirit of Alex's point first, and then you can.
Well, I was going to try to elucidate it, but no, go ahead if you want to ask him more questions.
No, I just want to see if I'm understanding him correctly. So
yeah, go ahead.
The spirit of the point, it seems to me, might be that like, so with the so with the like everyday experience stuff, like it's a more like, okay, whether people are having spiritual experiences or not, it's sort of a more like basic issue about like whether your sense impressions in general are veridical. And then like, there's like, I mean, we could sort of look at someone's psychology. We can see if it's operating, in a way that normal human psychology does, blah, blah, blah. Like there are sort of like standardized answers for that. But then when it comes to like the mystical experience stuff, a lot of it's based on like, ooh, do I have the right subjective impression or not? Do I, how does this feel to me? Is this the thing that I can take a subjective leap of faith on, blah, blah, blah. And so that seems like a lot more sort of, it seems like it's on a lot less stable ground than like, I don't know, judging, whether you're accurately perceiving things in an everyday context, right? Maybe
Okay,
that's your point.
Yeah. That sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Xbox or the other person, if you guys want to go with that.
Well, here's what the distinction I was going to make, that from that vantage point, that totally makes sense what Alex says, that if you're going to consider something like solipsism, then it's irrelevant from that point of view, because if we're gonna they're justified in the sense that if I'm a brain in a vat, and if I'm not, then you are a brain in a vat. So the whole thing becomes moot, moot point, like it's irrelevant, from that vantage point. So we can kind of ignore it. Ultimately, they'll admit that they don't know whether it's the fact or the case, but we can sidestep it by saying that, even if we do say it's the case, then what's the whole point of the discussion, And so I think the difference is from the mystic is that when the mystic goes into the mystical experience, this dissolution of, this all time collapsing into the moment. In other words, it's an experiential phenomenon where they have the impression of undergoing all experience. So if for them, there is no question of the vat, because they have they're privy and they have an insight to all facets of reality, let's say. That's what you have to posit.
They think they do, right? But
okay.
That's the thing that's in question, right? They don't actually.
Sure, you
right?
could say that. You could say you think they do, but from the reason the mystic is so confident is because they believe they do. They believe they have this.
Because they think they do.
You could. Yeah, but see, Alex, how do you know? You could say, if you don't even know if you're a brain in a vat, how do you know the mystic doesn't have all access? You know what I mean? You can't say either one.
Well, to be clear, I don't think he ever said he doesn't know that he's not a brain in a vat. Like, I think
he did tell you that. He did tell you.
Well, no, what he said was he thinks he has, it's okay to be confident even if he doesn't have some but
really
for
the reasons I explained,
to present in favor of not being a brain in a vat, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
but for the reasons I explained, that it's practical. It's it's ultimately it's not something metaphysical that he could possess knowledge of, and he admitted that. But for a practical sense, there is no reason to entertain that thought, because if we do, then this whole conversation is moot point.
But look, if it strikes me that there's imagine somebody joins the conversation in a minute and starts saying, well, I have a direct radio to brain communication with, the Lord Orgazoid on the planet Alpha Centauri, blah, blah, blah. And he tells me all the things I should do, et cetera, and
sure.
He told me I should join this call, right? And we go, I really think that you're just insane. And you're just, you've done too much acid tonight or whatever. Some other explanation is going on probably, other than it's actually true and he really is, blah, blah, blah. But of course, or any other kind of fanciful scenario you could dream up like that.
But there's a problem with that.
That person is sort of not able to know, really, are they?
Yeah.
I mean, they think it, they're confident about it. Their experience probably sort of seems like that. They probably feel like they've got the voice in their head, et cetera, et cetera. So there's nothing you could add to their experience that would make it possible for them to know they were right.
I agree,
wrong,
but I've heard that one many times over. The difference is that when we come back to these, characteristics that have been recognized over, literally decades, centuries, millennia, there's nothing that points to this absurd point. You know what I mean? That there's like that you're bringing up such a hypothesis that the only way for you to make it valid is that you would have to mimic what the mystic is pointing at. But see, the mystic is not pointing at this absurd notion. It always falls back into these very defined characteristics.
I just sort of think, so what? Like, so what if it's it's not the Lord Orgazoid, and it's feeling that everything. Well, so
Sure.
what? Like, what? Nothing says in the first place that this type of experience means that it's true, right? So what if it's a different type of experience?
But okay,
Why
but
should I be interested in that?
Even if you say that it holds true of a lot of these professionals, they tie the mystical experience up with the so-called perennial philosophy, that that there is an underlying metaphysical truth that undergirds all the world's major religions. It's just simply that the world's major religions refers to it in various ways, so that the divine is Brahman, it's Allah, it's God. It's not Zoidberg, but still it's.
Well, but what if it is Zoidberg though? Like,
the thing is,
what might be helpful is if, like, so like clearly there's this like pluralistic aspect, like, we could in this way accept the traditions of all the different religions.
Sure.
Because they all have experiences, mystical experiences or whatever. But like, maybe, like, it seems to me the question that Alex is getting at, or maybe something like it, is like,
Sure.
okay, if someone comes along and says, oh, I've just had an atheist mystical experience in which the universe has beamed into my head that there is no God, right? Or something like that. Something that we're not going to admit into the pluralistic mystical reality, right?
Sure.
What's the sort of, rigorous criteria by which you refute that person, right?
Well,
how do you tell them their mystical experience isn't like a genuine?
Yeah, well, of course I've come across.
Yeah, they keep doing that.
The thing is that the characteristics are defined very concretely, and they don't really align with so-called atheistic philosophy, if I may. The reason why we have these traditions that have age-long traditions, whether it be Hinduism or Buddhism or Christianity, you can come along and say some, make up some neologism, some new term out of your own fanciful imagination, but it doesn't have the grip that the
but why would you say it's from my fanciful imagination? Like, what's the specific refutation?
Well, I mean, I'm referring to things like the Zoidberg kind of thing, and in other words, like a religion. I mean, the earliest example you could point to Mormonism, which is a fairly relative young religion. And you could say that, Joseph Smith may have had a mystical experience, maybe not, he did engage in a lot of hanky-panky, but and he didn't seem to really exhibit the principles that are, necessary.
But what are the principles? Like, can we get down to like the specific?
Well, the characteristics of this experience that, people often report transcendence of time and space. That's one reason why it's so hard to speak upon. Because we live in an intense time, like this happened yesterday, this happens tomorrow. We have no language.
Hold on, sorry, but you've started talking about something else again, right? You're very keen to talk about the characteristics that define a mystical experience.
Yes.
Whereas what we're interested in is the characteristics that define a veridical mystical experience. So the things you're talking about don't help us, right? Just saying that, like, commonly throughout history, mystical experiences are correlated with the dissolution of the ego or feeling like time and space have stopped or whatever. None of that helps us in answering the question of, are any of those true, right? It doesn't matter that they conform to a pattern.
If you see they're true to
irrelevant,
the degree,
right? Like, do you not understand why this is?
I
get
where you're coming from, but I would say they're true to the degree that they've been recognized through millennia. That cannot be
recognized as being veridic markers of mystical experiences being truthful. Is that what you think they've been recognized as being? Markers that are mystical experiences truthful?
I do think it's the closest we can glimpse to truth, in my humble opinion. only because I've had such phenomenon occur to myself.
And I'm not trying to take away
Yeah,
from
one-
any of the experiences you've had, but the research you're talking about is trying to classify different types of experiences, like Aborigines and bloody whatever, all across the world who have
Yes.
different types of, but they overlap and they have a similarity to them. Right?
Yes.
They all engage in the same type of altered
Correct.
states of consciousness, etc., etc. Right? I do know about this stuff. Right? My point is just that it doesn't matter how carefully. If you start by just classifying the types of things around the world and say, oh, they all have this thing in common, you can't then go, and therefore, if anyone has a thing like that, it means that it's true. Right? That's the thing I'm saying.
I
is
don't,
not
but
valid
see,
reason.
I don't,
and you
I
must
don't think-
agree.
but I don't think that's necessarily what these professionals are saying. They're acknowledging that, you know, they are true in the extent that they have been recognized over millennia. You know,
Recognized as what? You keep saying that. Recognized as being markers
these
of
universal
veridicality?
features.
No.
These universal features that come over epochs of time and again, that, you know, that they can induce in their volunteers today if they, you know, gave them a so-called heroic dose of a psychedelic, or they made them engage in a particular type of you know, endurance of meditation. You know, they recognize them true in that regard.
That doesn't mean anything. It's not true in that regard. Look, they've grouped together people who have experiences of a certain type, like the dissolution of the ego, or feeling like it's space and time of blah blah blah, whatever. Right. They just say that's happening over here in this part of space and time, and then over here on the other side of the earth, it's happening with these people too, right? But that doesn't tell you if the experiences they're going through are genuine, or if they're just the byproducts of drugs or dehydration or whatever. It doesn't answer that question. It doesn't matter how carefully you characterize it.
Okay,
that's not going to tell you whether it's true or not, is it?
All it tells you, Kafai, all it tells you is that the same kind of thing happened to your brain as these other people, right?
No,
I mean, it's the same meltdown. It doesn't tell you any truth beyond that, is what Alex is saying.
I would absolutely adhere to that. I agree with Alex in that sense, but I think, you know, we're speaking from you know, an empirical sense. You know, for empirical science that can't really probe into a direct experience of what these people are actually undergoing. They can only get this kind of secondhand hearsay from reports, from fMRI, from, you know, EEG, what have you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They can never pierce into directly what they're undergoing.
But this is not a good response, because I'm not presupposing that we can only know stuff from the basis of MRI scans or anything like that. I didn't say anything like that.
No, but that's not my point.
If I had said a load of stuff,
I would.
That wasn't necessarily my point. My point was that science, you know, necessarily has to operate in an empirical sense from this secondhand kind of perspective, whereas, you know, the people that they evaluate will flat out say that this is, you know, more true than, you know, everyday reality, more
of course
real.
They will. That's
so on
fine.
and so forth.
That doesn't matter. That doesn't look. What I'm doing is just probing it using reason, right? And that's not just a province of scientists. And you can't say, well, but if you've had the experience, then blah blah blah. It doesn't matter. If you haven't got an explanation that stands up to these questions, right? If I'm asking you to explain how come, what's the criteria, blah blah blah, and you can't explain it. It doesn't matter. You can't hide behind, well, that's a scientist worldview or something. It's just normal questioning. I mean, I'm not presupposing anything with these questions.
I am not trying to argue against that with you. I love your mind. I love the way you think about these things. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to. I'm not here to kind of naysay everything that you're putting forth. I really like. I think you're really genuine in your curiosity about these topics. What I'm essentially saying is that I don't think it's enough to say that empirical science can have the end all be all say on these things. I think neuroscience. I think consciousness is still very much a mystery to neuroscience, and to the degree that we don't study mystical experience, it will remain a mystery. I think we have to evaluate all these factors. Otherwise,
I could agree with that, even if I didn't think there were any veridical mystical experiences, right?
Okay.
So all of that sounds nice, but if we just come back to the point on the table, which was that, like, you can't, I think there's no hope of a criteria in sight, you're never going to be able to say anything that
Okay,
distinguishes
but you see,
a
that's
mystical experience from
I mean,
a non-mystical one.
I know I read this from you. You know, that's a claim in and of itself. It's like saying like we're never gonna know. That there is no way. Even that is a claim. Like that you're
Yeah,
kind of.
and I gave you some reasoning to back it up.
All right. So
before
you're saying there's
about-
like an ultimate agnosticism that our minds are incapable of knowing. You know, that's a claim in and of itself.
in a certain sense, that's right. And then I think that when we step back from it, like if I can't really ever know whether or not I'm dreaming, right? But I mean, in your case in particular, if we look at what you've proposed in particular for what counts as how you can tell if a mystical experience is veridical or not, those things just obviously don't work, and nothing like that could work. So like it's just we're left scratching our heads thinking, well, gee, if the claim was true, right? How is there any way of ever being able to know it? And I just can't see anything, right? So if you can tell me that there is something, that would be different. But just there's nothing in sight, right?
May ask you one more thing, Alex, before take the opportunity to go.
Yeah, I have to go. I'm like way late.
One more thing. I would say that I think what this view ultimately proposes is that there is a way to know. You may disagree with that, but I think that's what the mystics, the message of the mystics are saying, essentially that there is a way to know. Another aspect I would bring up is like, I think you're I don't know if it was you that brought up the ayahuasca thing, but if it was you, I would say, would you be willing to try ayahuasca to really put this notion to the test?
How do you know I haven't done stuff like that before already?
Because I could have sworn
presupposing.
If it wasn't you that brought it up earlier, someone did.
I mentioned it because I just rewatched The Sopranos, and there's a scene.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, okay. Well, I mean, would you be honest in saying whether you've done it or not?
I mean, I don't want to talk about my personal life. I don't really think
that's fine.
That's fine. It doesn't help arguments that way. Okay, I'm going to just step in here because we've been going well over 2 hours.
No, sorry, I'm going to go away and you guys do it.
Alex, please don't. Let's just go. I'd like to go around the room once and say, has anybody got a pithy explanation of true or anything they want to end on? And if they don't, that's fine. So let's start with you, Alex, because you've expressed that you want to get out of here because it is late.
Well, I've probably already said far too much as well, so I'll just with what I've said.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for coming by, Alex.
Over to you, Dave.
Fun.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Dave. Anything you want to say at the end, or hawk any of your products, or say anything at all?
I think we've touched on a lot of it. That it's very important to define what category or what topic you're talking about when discussing what is true and not true. And catch us every Saturday at Saturday Night at the Atheist with some of the folks here that join us as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
And subscribe to Answers in Atheism, for God's sake.
And obviously that's Mike done. Thank you very much, Mike. Over to you, Piper. Anything on the topic that you might have to say? Oh, you're away at the moment. That's fine. Lucky, over to you.
As usual, Alex gives us a lot to think about, and what I possibly came into this conversation with as an idea of truth is being totally shattered. So there you go.
So you're having an existential crisis tonight. Okay, that's fine. Enjoy the dreams or mystical experiences, whichever they happen to be. Over to you, Brian.
Yeah, our work here is done, apparently. No, apologies for the first half, just like technical issues. Yeah, that's also a truth that we have to deal with in this day and age. So I missed a lot of it, and I think we managed to get the point across that the difference between subjective truth and objective truth is a thing. But just to finish, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, I don't think, but or maybe we did. The presuppositional element in order for something to be true, it has to have some sort of presuppositional foundation, some sort of context within which it is true. So maybe that can be for another day.
We will do one on presuppositionalists. Maybe, I don't know. We did speak about it briefly in this one. Okay. Kafai,
There you go. That's
anything
me
you
done.
wanted to? Yep, Kafai, over to you. Anything you wanted to say?
No, this was awesome. Thank you, Simon.
You're welcome.
I've always been trying to chime in with you guys every time you, perform one of these. And today I had a chance, so I'm really glad I had an opportunity to speak to you, Alex. That was awesome. I've been watching your work with Steve McRae and stuff like that, man. I've loved all your stuff. So I come in goodwill, man, and good spirits. So I'm not, I'm not here to try to really challenge your ideas. I'm just really here to spark your curiosity, man. That's all.
That's what it's about, isn't it? It's about a big conversation and maybe going over ground we've been over before or not, or finding new ground. It doesn't matter which. Okay, thank you so much. And I'm sure most of these ideas we can put in a Venn diagram or even an Euler diagram by the sounds of it, or Euler, whichever you pronounce it as. Piper, are you there yet? Did you want to say something to finish with? As usual, straight to the point. Over to you, Headless.
I think Headless has just got one thing to say.
No, Headless has always got something to say, I know.
Anyway, I'll just leave you with this, Simus. 12%.
12%? Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about the 12%.
Oh, yeah.
Never mind. We'll get to that next time,
we'll talk
I
about
feel.
12%.
Exactly. That's an in-joke, which will go. Mike, did you want to say
I'm
something
intrigued.
other than... Yeah, okay.
Me?
We need a specific person in for the 12%. But over to you, Speed. Did you want to say something other than what you said about hawking new goods? Do you want to say something about the topic? Or...
I'm always begging people now because I'm really old. But anyway,
there's not much
truth
time left, is there, for us? I know.
It's all biological, all naturalism. You can explain every damn thing if you just accept space, time, and particles and work out from there. And
right.
So that's my concept of truth, knowledge, everything. So there you go.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, just one final thing from the chat room of all places. Thank you, Sandy, for reminding us all of 42.
Thank you. There you go. Lucky, before I end with Xbox, Lucky, you chimed in there.
Oh, I'll let the stream end.
Okay, over to you, Xbox, to take us out. And as usual, these people are far beyond me. Go ahead, Xbox. Sorry.
My dogs were barking off. I thought this actually turned into a really great talk because I loved the ending. I loved the beginning. The truth. I'm still not sure if it's a thing.
Yeah.
Is this true? I don't know. I kind of agree with Alex who said we should just drop it. So I appreciate everybody that came out. This is a great show.
Great. We will be off air for a short while, so those that are trying to get in, I'm sure there'll be some room in a minute when a few people drop. So keep trying if you're trying to get in now, and I will add you to the off air section of the podcast, and you can talk as long as you like. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll be on next week, and I don't know if I've got the topic already. I don't to hand. So there will be a topic for next week, and hopefully you can all join us again then. Thank you very much, everybody.